We're starting with one of the biggest conversations on the global scene now, and it's been like that for about 15 months. The Gaza situation, which culminated to the peace deal between Israel and Hamas in its third day now since Sunday, so it depends on how you're counting. And also, Nigeria has some sort of relationship with the parties as well. So we're going to be x-raying these issues, the global angle and of course the local angle as well. We're joined by the Ambassador Embassy of Israel in Nigeria, His Excellency Michael Freeman. He's live for us from our Abuja studio. Good morning and welcome to the Morning Brief, Your Excellency.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
I'll just get right into it. How is the peace deal holding? 3 days now, a 15-month conflict culminated into this. We've seen lots of deaths, but I think the glimmer of hope has been this peace deal, which has been a long time coming. So how well or otherwise is it holding so far?
Look, you're right, it's a glimmer of hope. We have just started a ceasefire deal. It's not a full peace agreement, and I think that's important for your viewers to understand. This is a ceasefire agreement. It is stage one of a three-stage ceasefire agreement. And in this first stage, the Israeli troops have pulled back to certain places, but most importantly, Israel will be receiving 33 of the 98 hostages that were remaining within Gaza. 3 of those we saw released on Sunday. 3 young women, 3 amazing, strong women who were released by Hamas, Romi and Emily and Doron, who the 3 of them were released. And we still have a further 94 that are being held by Hamas. And the aim of this deal is to get them back. And after we have those back, we will talk about stages 2 and 3 and returning the rest of our hostages.
That's cheery to hear. There were reports of bodies found on day 2. There were reports of attacks as well, just before Sunday when it was meant to take a hold. So for some people, they're just watching with bated breath and hoping that this will really hold. But the newly sworn-in president of the United States, 47th President Donald Trump, made a statement about this ceasefire. And this is what he said. He said that, well, he's not confident that the Gaza ceasefire will hold. In fact, in his words, and I'll just take an excerpt from what he said, he said, that's not our war, it's their war, but I'm not confident. But he also spoke about, how Hamas has been weakened, how the place looks like a demolition zone. So hearing the president of the U.S., biggest ally of Israel, saying he's not confident, what do you have to say to that?
I understand President Trump's comments. President Trump is somebody who has been very involved in this deal. He's helped us push it over the line. He's helped push Hamas into this deal, but Hamas are a radical terror organization, and when President Trump says he's not confident that it will move forward, that is because we're not confident that Hamas will stick by this agreement. Hamas has breached every other agreement. Remember, this whole war started on October the 7th when Hamas came across the border with thousands of fighters, with thousands of terrorists, and they murdered Israelis, they raped Israelis, they tortured Israelis, and they kidnapped over 250. They murdered over 1,200 Israeli men, women, and children, and kidnapped 250 men, women, and children into Gaza. And so at this point, when you're dealing with a terror organization who is still holding children, let's be clear here, Hamas is still holding 2 children, a 2-year-old baby and a 4-year-old, that it's been holding for now 474 days, and whilst they are holding them and not releasing them, that's the type of people you're dealing with. So there is certainly a skepticism about whether or not the ceasefire will hold, because it's not clear that you can trust Hamas to carry out the terms of that ceasefire.
So if we look at, there's enough blame game to go around. So we're talking about Hamas holding those 2 children, totally unacceptable. The killings that happened on October 7, 2023, totally unacceptable. But there has also been deaths on the side of Gaza, which comes to about 46. I know that's 46,000. More of them children, and those numbers have been disputed. But the records are there that children were killed by some of the raids carried out by Israel in chasing Hamas out of Gaza. So my question is actually, why is this so fragile? Is it the fragility? Is it just basically on the side of Hamas, or Israel has a bit of a share of the blame as well? Because they have been killing on both sides. In fact, more killings on one side.
Israel has no interest in being in the Gaza Strip. Remember, we left in 2005. We withdrew all of our soldiers. We withdrew all of the Israelis that were living there. And we did so in order to have a better relationship with the Palestinians in Gaza. Israel does not want to be in Gaza. Israel has no territorial claim to Gaza. We want to have a positive relationship with the Palestinians that are living there. It is Hamas who have utilized Gaza as a terror base, the world's largest terror base, to attack Israel, to send rockets into Israel, to send terrorists across the border, to murder, to rape, to burn children alive, to burn whole families alive, to torture and to kidnap. And it is Israel that has defended itself and done what any country in the world would do, which is to ensure that we have safe borders and we ensure this can never happen again. You know, you talked about the ceasefire. When the ceasefire was announced on Friday, I believe, last week, the head of Hamas went on television and said, "We're very, very pleased about the ceasefire. We can now prepare to carry out October the 7th again and again and again. We're very, very proud of what we did." And that's what we're up against. So for Israel's perspective, we want to have a peaceful border. We want to make sure there is a better future for Israelis and a better future for Palestinians. And in order for that to happen, there can't be Hamas in control of the Gaza Strip. It means we need to demilitarize Hamas, and we need to put in place a new leadership, a different leadership that will provide a better future and a better prospect for everybody, and that can't be Hamas.
For the people of Palestine who live in Gaza, who nobody supports terrorism, let's be clear on that, who see themselves as being protected by Hamas, quote and unquote, as far as this is concerned, and they don't want to feel like they are subservient to Israel. How is Israel ready to walk them through this process? Because at the end of the day, it's peace everyone is trying to achieve. The fragility in the zone affects the rest of the world.
Well, I wouldn't say to you that Hamas there are looking to have any sort of relationship with Israel. And we say that, you know, we want, everybody here wants peace. But let's have a look at what this deal talks about. As I said to you, Israel has demanded the release of our hostages, including 2 children. Hamas, on the other hand, have demanded the release of terrorists. They have demanded the release of people like Arafat Irafia, who was responsible for the murder and rape of Orionsbacher in 2019. They have demanded the release of terrorists who carried out suicide bombings responsible for the death of dozens and dozens of Israelis. It's clear that Israel is asking for children back and Hamas is demanding terrorists back. That's the difference here between the two sides. And yes, the Palestinians in Gaza are suffering. They're also suffering underneath Hamas and underneath the rule of Hamas. You mentioned the numbers of people that have died on the Palestinian side. And firstly, we obviously dispute those numbers. We don't believe those numbers are accurate because they're provided by Hamas, a terror organization. But we have no doubt that there has been collateral damage, that a number of innocents have been killed in this conflict, because in a war, innocents die. There's never been a war in history where innocent people don't die. But the difference is that we're doing everything we can to avoid civilian casualties on the Palestinian side, and Hamas are doing everything they can in order to increase civilian casualties. We have seen that with the hostages that have come back, they told us they were held in civilian apartments. They were held in the humanitarian zone. We know that Hamas fighters have hidden in schools. They have hidden in hospitals. We saw at the beginning of the ceasefire yesterday, Al Jazeera, when they were filming, they showed the Hamas terrorists coming out of the hospitals after the ceasefire. So we've seen how Hamas are using it. We see on your screen at the moment the pictures here of the release of the 3 hostages. Here we have a baying crowd around 3 young women who were being released, and we have hundreds of armed terrorists standing around them, baying for their blood, and it's clear what we're dealing with here.
Well,
So Israel is interested in having a peaceful relation with our Palestinian neighbors, but that cannot happen when we have Hamas in control there.
and what do you say to those who say, well, maybe Israel is not being fair in this, particularly for that two-state solution proposal, and they wonder why would Israel still want to have full security, authority in that sense, instead of at least sharing? And that's also another bone of contention, the two-state solution. This has been on for decades now. What do you say to those people?
Well, I say to those people that Israel wants a peaceful relationship with the Palestinians. The Palestinians are our neighbors, and we want to have a peaceful relationship. And we need to have conversations with them about the future. But if you ask me about a two-state solution, I would ask you, what is that state that you're talking about for the Palestinians? Is that state a state like Gaza? Is that a state that's run by Hamas, that doesn't allow democracy, that doesn't allow people to talk, doesn't allow criticism, and carries out murders and attacks on its own people, as well as launching attacks against Israel? That's clearly not the type of state that anyone would want. That's not good for the Palestinians. It's obviously not good for Israel. It's not good for the region, and it's not good for peace and security. So I think when people throw around these terminology, we need to be very, very clear about what that means. We want peaceful relations with our neighbors. We want a better future. It's in my interest, it's in Israel's interest for us to have peaceful relations and better relations with the Palestinians, who are our neighbors, and we certainly want to work towards that. But in order to do that, and in order to work towards the two-state solution that you talk about, Hamas can't be part of that. There's no possibility of a two-state solution. There's no possibility of a better future if Hamas are in power and Hamas are still existing.
So, Ambassador, in your books, do you really believe that there can be such a solution where Hamas will not be involved one way or the other? Because it appears that sometimes this agreement gets to a cul-de-sac where it looks like there's no way forward. So, from where Israel sits, what really is the best solution that will be acceptable to all? I use that word very deliberately, to all.
Well, it's not for me to decide what the solution is for everybody. That's the conversation that myself and not the Israelis and the Palestinians and the region need to be had. But we've seen in the last number of years that the issue here of the Palestinians is not the key issue. We've seen Israel has had new peace agreements with the United Arab Emirates. We've seen it with Bahrain. We saw it with Morocco. We've seen it with other countries. Israel is having conversations with more and more Arab countries. So we need to separate out the issues. But the reality is that we want to have a better relationship with the Palestinians. But in order to do that, we have to remove Hamas. Hamas themselves say there can never be a state of Israel. Their aim is to destroy the state of Israel. Their aim is to kill every single Jew around the world. They openly state it. It's in their constitution. It's what they believe in. So there's no possibility of a talk of a better future whilst Hamas is there and while Hamas is in control. They need to be removed. Hamas also terrorizes its own people. Over $5 billion of international aid has been pumped into Gaza over the last number of years. And how much of that has gone to the people? Very, very little. The majority has gone to the Hamas leadership. It's lining their own pockets. They have stolen all of that. And the other aid that they didn't steal, they used it to build an underground tunnel network for their terrorists. They used it to build rockets, to build missiles. They used it to train suicide bombers, to train their...
Oh dear. We hope we can get back His Excellency the Ambassador Freeman to continue the conversation. A couple of questions we need to ask. It's a very, very delicate conversation. And as far as the issue of the peace deal is concerned, of course, there's the ceasefire agreement, which is clearly different from the peace deal. Peace deal conversation will come maybe 16 days into the ceasefire agreement, and then we'll now begin. So there are three phases. We have the release of hostages and prisoners in the first phase, and then we talk about the ending of the war as much as possible, where the peace deal conversation begins, especially within the Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank and the rest of them. Of course, the last phase we understand has to be the reconstruction of Gaza. is literally a site, like, you just know the destruction. You've seen this on your screens all over international media. So that reconstruction, we understand, will take billions of naira and many, many years.
Did you say naira?
Billions of dollars, my apologies, and will take many, many years. So that's why, Ambassador, we lost connection with you for a moment, but as we begin to wind down on the conversation around the Gaza Strip and this war, before we move on to Nigeria-Israel relations, the reason I asked that question that you were responding to, on one hand, when you talk about Hamas, I remember Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talking about annihilation, talking about from Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. They also accuse far-right extremists in Israel of also wanting the same thing. So it looks like on both sides, depending on who you are talking to, there are extreme views as far as this is concerned. So if, when the conversation starts perhaps in the second phase that has to do with some level of peace, what will be some of the strong points or the places or the points that Israel is not ready to shift grounds on, that Hamas or Palestine Authority needs to look at before any peace can be, subjected to any form of scrutiny for the world to move forward from there?
Well, as you said, the second phase of this deal is to be talking about a longer-term ceasefire. It's a longer-term ceasefire in Gaza and moving forward. In order to do that, we need to make sure that whatever authority is in Gaza, whoever is controlling Gaza, is not Hamas and is committed to a positive relationship with Israel and is committed to making sure that the October 7th massacres never take place again. That's our priority. Our priority at this stage is safety and security. It is to allow for our people to go to bed, to sleep in their beds and know that they don't have to worry that Hamas terrorists are going to come across the border and kidnap them. We spoke about these 3 young women who came home on Sunday, these lionesses, who came back after 470 days in Hamas captivity. 2 of them were sleeping in their beds. Doron and Ellie were in their beds when the terrorists came into their houses and kidnapped them. Romy was at a peace festival when they came in and they kidnapped her whilst they killed her friends. So these are normal people living normal lives like anybody around the world would be doing, and we need to make sure that in the next phase of this discussions that we can ensure that Hamas and other terrorists can never, ever, ever carry that out again. And once we ensure that, and once we can prove that there is indeed a strong border and a calm border and that Israeli citizens are safe, we can begin the process of having the conversation about the future. But there can't be a conversation about the future until we know that Israelis can be safe and Israelis can sleep safely, and that Hamas and the monsters that carried this out will never be able to do it again.
Let's now talk about the relations now, Nigeria-Israel relations. Yes, Israel is fighting that war, but that's not to say you don't have other obligations that you have to fulfill, and I'm talking bilateral relations and the rest. But before that, a lot of people they have this celebrity status that they've given Israel, particularly here in Nigeria, for a number of reasons. They can talk about your military, the weaponry, the Iron Dome, David Sling, intelligence and all of that. And for a lot of people, it comes from that biblical angle, right? Either the Christians or those who are Bible students or theology students, they just have that love for Israel. And that has brought up that question time and again. The Israel of today, is it the same as the biblical Israel? Some have asked time and again. I'd like you to speak to that, because they ask, the biblical Israel had God choosing their leaders, but the Israel we see today, at least that started from 1948, now has democracy and all of that. So I'd like you to speak to that. Is the Israel of today the same as biblical Israel, Ambassador?
It's a great question. Thank you very much for that question. The reality is this, that Israel is in the same land. We are the same people with the same religion, speaking the same language in our same homeland with our same ancestral homeland. So in that sense, yes, this is the same Israel of the Bible. But Israel today is also a modern state. This is an Israel that is a world leader in agriculture, it's a world leader in technology, it's a world leader in cyber, in health, in education, in so many different areas, in climate change, in digital economy, in the internet, in many, many, many different areas. Israel is one of the world leaders, and in some areas the world leader, water management. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so the answer to your question is yes, we are the same people on the same land, speaking the same language, with the same religion as we were 3,000 years ago, but we are also a modern state and a different state and a democratic state that is dealing with many, many issues around the world and become a world leader in many issues.
So God is no more choosing the leaders. Whatever happened to the 12 tribes? This is a question, and I'm sure you've answered it time and again, but it's worth just putting out there, at least for those who want to know.
So look, we know in thousands of years ago, when the Roman Empire and the Babylonian Empire came and invaded and destroyed, many of the original 12 tribes were dispersed around the world. We still haven't found all of them. There are still some people around the world who believe that they are descended from the 12 tribes. We know that the Ethiopian Jewry is one of those tribes that was spread out, and we brought them back to Israel. Tens and hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians now call Israel their home. They serve in every single aspect of Israeli society. They're full citizens, and they have fulfilled their biblical promise of returning home on the wings of an eagle to their biblical homeland. And so many of the other tribes are still spread around the world, and we don't know where they are, on who they are. Maybe one day we'll discover them and we'll be able to bring them back home to Israel.
So, Ambassador, let's talk about some of the bilateral relations between Nigeria and Israel, and maybe we'll talk about trade and security. Nigeria has had its own fair share of its troubles, especially in the northern region when it comes to terrorism. And as my colleague Karida said, intelligence is respected that comes from Israel. How far-reaching is that relationship in helping to ensure there is not just exchange of commerce, but also stability in our country, especially in the northern part, to ensure that relationship is strengthened as much as possible to decimate some of these terrorist elements that we have here?
As you say, Israel and Nigeria have got a very, very strong bilateral relations. Nigeria is a strong friend of Israel, and we like to share with our friends, and we like to work with our friends. As you also say, unfortunately, Nigeria understands the threats of terrorism and understands the threats of insurgency and kidnapping, as we have also understood that as well. And we share with Nigeria in many different areas. And one of them is obviously in the security realm, but I'm not you wouldn't expect me to go into details of what that cooperation is. We speak with Nigeria, we work with Nigeria, and we're always willing to share and work with our friends, but for obvious reasons, I'm not going to go into specific details about what that security cooperation may or may not be.
In other words, a lot of people want to know, is Israel maybe supporting Nigeria and building some sort of Iron Dome or David Sling? You know, these conversations happen. To what extent?
Really? David said, fortunately for Nigeria, David Sling and Iron Dome aren't relevant for Nigeria, because you don't have rockets being fired on you on a daily basis. You know, Niger or Chad or Cameroon are not firing rockets into you or firing missiles into your civilian populations. So obviously Iron Dome and David Sling aren't relevant here. But the other areas are anti-terrorism, counter-terrorism, intelligence sharing. All of those sorts of things are areas that are relevant. And again, I'm not going to go into details, but the areas that are relevant, we are more than willing and interested in sharing with friends and having conversations with friends.
And we pray it stays that way, really. We need peace everywhere, and particularly in the sub-region. But there's also the conversation around tech and agriculture. We must not lose sight of that. And for a lot of people, it's interesting. They didn't know that there was some sort of collaboration in the area of tech and agriculture. So we have about a minute to wind down. Perhaps you want to speak to that as well.
How do I get in so much collaboration into 1 minute? We have an IAIR program which is a program which takes young Nigerian innovators and entrepreneurs, and we work with them for a 6-month mentorship program with Israelis and Nigerian experts, and then we help take them to market, we help find them funding and investment, and we have created some very large and impressive companies and created thousands of jobs in Nigeria and huge investment, millions of dollars of investment from outside. We are working on agriculture, on the area fields of rice and on corn and on tomatoes and cucumbers and other areas to be able to grow greater crops in using less water with greater yields. We are working in tech. 45% of Israel's GDP is based on tech and based on human capital, and so we want to share that with Nigeria. So it's a huge conversation. Not enough to speak in a minute. I'm more than happy to come back and have a long conversation with you on agriculture and tech and different areas, how we can work together to really carry on improving the lives of Nigerians and Israelis with shared information and technology.
Particularly when you see the value of a trade, hundreds of millions of dollars. So this is certainly a conversation we would have in the coming days. It's something we need to explore further. But we have to thank you so much for your time. We're speaking with the Ambassador, Embassy of Israel in Nigeria, His Excellency Michael Freeman. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed.
And we have to say that we also reached out to the Palestine authorities, the embassy here in Nigeria. We're told for now there is no ambassador, but as soon as that is put in place, we'll get some sort of response, or at least the other side to this conversation. A very important one. We'll see how the developments unfold in the Middle East. We'll take a moment now on the show, and when we return, we talk about the out-of-school children challenge in Nigeria, and we're paying attention to one of the northern states. Do not miss this. Stay with us.